So much of business is about your own internal game. The actual dynamics of business are not that difficult. There are problems which need to be solved. But what's the challenge there? Well, the inherent challenge is capacity to sustain change and the capacity to be malleable and adaptive. That's what our unique capacity as human beings is this capacity to mutate.
Top leaders, meaningful conversation, actionable advice, bulldoze complacency, ignite inspiration, create impact. Produced by Southwestern family of companies. This is the Action Catalyst.
Today's guest is Patrick McAndrew, a seasoned entrepreneur and high-performance coach, and the founder and CEO of HARA, an exclusive membership community and network for the top 1% of entrepreneurs and business leaders. Patrick has a wealth of experience that merges cutting-edge technology with deep human insight, and we're excited to talk to him. Well, Patrick, we're so excited to chat with you today. You're coaching and providing a lot of value to, you say, the kind of the 1% of the 1% in business. So if I somehow stumbled upon you in secondary school and I said, Patrick, what do you want to be when you grow up? What would a secondary school Patrick have shared?
I think at that time it depends. If it was like at the beginning of secondary school, I think I wanted to be an actor. If it was the middle of the time in secondary school, I wanted to have a talk show. I wanted to host a talk show.
Were you already like planning and thinking of coming to the States? Were you wanting to build a career in Ireland, or what was that even floating through your mind at that time?
Well, I always was very taken by the US and this New York in particular, where I lived for 5 years, and it was sort of hung over my head that if you do well enough on these exams, Patrick, my mum would say, I'll take you on a trip to New York. But that trip to New York never manifested. The first time I came to the States, I think I was maybe 19, and we came on a family trip and we went to Clearwater Beach for Christmas. And as you can imagine, the United States was New York in my mind. Like that was the country, that there was no sense or curiosity about the others. And I remember driving from Tampa to Clearwater, and I had never seen things like strip malls. And they're the most foreign, alien-looking thing ever, like seeing Dunkin' Donuts and Wendy's and Burger King, but all in these just sort of these parallel units alongside a road. And I remember thinking, this doesn't look like the impression that I had of this country at all. So I had to start to come to terms to realize that there are different parts of this country, and they all hold different characters.
Yeah. A lot of drywall prefabrication, not a lot of stone cathedrals that were modernized.
Indeed, yeah.
Walk me through a little bit of your time in Ireland after that. I mean, going to school, developing, what were things that you started to gravitate to as you matured and aged up, and how did that influence the direction you were headed?
I think there's always just been a tendency just to follow curiosities. So when I was in college, I studied law, but I had a radio show. I also worked in a regional radio station as a sound engineer. So I would be there during the live shows, and I would be turning on the ads and fading in the music and all that stuff and meeting the guests. And there was something there. There was something about conversing and meeting people. I grew up in a home where there was constantly people coming through, whether it was people traveling from around the world coming to stay with us, or eccentric characters that my mum had come across, or she had an employment agency for a large number of years. The nurses that would be coming into Ireland, they would stay with us for a few days before they would go to the nursing home or the hospital where they were going to work. So we would sort of like take care of them because they would be homesick and get them settled. She also had a jewelry business where she made bespoke engagement rings for couples. So there was a room in the house where they would come in and they would be presented. They would come in to design the engagement ring they wanted, and then my mum would take the design and go to Antwerp and get it made. And then they would come back and she would have a bottle of champagne, and we would see the joy, and we would maybe have a meal with them and talk with them. You know, that sort of nature, that very convivial nature was very normal in my household growing up. So there was always different cultures, different characters. And I, growing up as a young kid, grew up in London before I moved to Ireland. And for a number of years, and during that time in London, I actually lived in a gallery. So my parents had rented the flat that they had in London and then took out a lease on this gallery to manage the expenses of it all. They built drywall and they built rooms within the gallery, which were never there. It was just a big open space. And they built like a little apartment and a home at the back. And when I would leave my bedroom, I would walk out onto the gallery. So when I would come home from school, I would enter in through a gallery to get to my room. And when I was there, and my mum was, she didn't really have many staff. So if there was a lot of people coming through as a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, it was my role to guide them around and show them the pieces of glass and the pieces of art and keep them entertained for a few minutes until my mum could speak to them. So all of that, I think the way of observing and engaging with people has sort of been inherent to my lived experience. We also had the most traveled man in the world stay with us for a few days. I don't know if he still holds that title, but he did at that time. He had been traveling for 24 years, and Ireland was the last country on his world tour. So I came home from school one day, and my mum was at the kitchen table chatting with this guy, and she said, "This is Mike Patrick. I think I was telling you about him. He's the most traveled man in the world. I heard him on the radio 3 days ago. I sent a text into the station and said, if you're coming to Galway and you need somewhere to stay, just let me know." And he called her up on the phone. He said, "Hey, is this Julia?" And she said, "Yeah." He said, "It's Mike. I've just arrived into Galway bus station. Is that offer still standing to stay with you for a few days?" And she said, "Absolutely." So we got to hang out with him for 3 or 4 days. And he had been in Somalia. He had been in Mogadishu. He was one of the first tourists there in a very long time. He was in the town across, not very far away from in Iraq, where Osama bin Laden had been captured. He traveled through Afghanistan. He had been all over, but places that you rarely hear about. He was a quirky character for sure, but it was interesting conversations with him.
I can only imagine. And what a cool exposure that you got to diversity through your own home with all these people coming through. So fast forward from this, you've become a sought after speaker. What led to that type of work exactly?
Well, it started out with speed reading. So I was teaching speed reading memorization workshops around the country. I was going into schools and colleges and companies like Bessemer Trust, Northern Trust, quite a few hedge funds and investment banks, helping these people improve how they processed and retained information. And that was a very interesting experience because I realized, if you want to pay, I don't know, what is it? It's somewhere in the region of like 160 or 180,000 for an MBA at Columbia University. I got to go in and see those people in that room. Amazing networking, amazing conceptual frameworks and models and ways of thinking about business. But so much of business is about your own internal game. The actual dynamics of business are not that difficult. There are problems which need to be solved, absolutely, and problems keep arising. But what's the challenge there? Well, the inherent challenge is the capacity to sustain change and the capacity to be malleable and adaptive. I think that's what our unique capacity as human beings is this capacity to mutate, to be one way and then to recognize that the environment has changed. I must mutate into another way. But yet I can retain my true essence. I don't lose myself under the conditions of the environment. I maintain myself, but I'm not bound to this identity. I'm good at this or I like this, so therefore I'm only going to try and find a business that operates on the fundamentals of me being very good at doing stuff on a computer, but I don't want to interact with people in person. Well, I've just cut off so much opportunity to myself. So maybe if I can develop certain qualities of how I engage with others, much more will show for me. So I saw in all of these environments that I went into that these people are learning a lot of information, but it's not taking them so far because they're not learning about themselves. In fact, they're neglecting themselves. They're only trying to develop this 10% area which it feels like it's directly relevant to business. But there's this other 90% which determines your clarity, your conviction, your essence, your value, your sense of self-worth. And if you're clear on all of that, you can achieve a whole lot more and you can feel content and you can feel like your whole life is in alignment. It doesn't feel like it's so fragmented. So I began in that journey by teaching people about focus because that was the thing. Through my exposure to different environments of teaching speed reading, I realized, wow, okay, these people that I'm meeting, they're very driven. They're not lacking motivation, yet companies are spending, thousands, tens of thousands every conference for a motivational speaker. The people don't need motivation. They've plenty drive. What they lack is a pragmatic sense of how to organize themselves. They're missing internal structure. It's pretty chaotic in there. So the first place that I approached was focus because I thought the people needed help with focus, which they did. But then over years and years of doing that, working with Pacific Life, Lincoln Financial, Morgan Stanley, all these companies, I realized, okay, I can teach you how to focus and I can make you very good at doing the tasks efficiently. But there's a deeper problem there. There's a much deeper problem, and it's your capacity to regulate yourself. It's your capacity to actually regulate and relate to yourself. And that's actually more of the foundational layer that causes a lot of the problems. Leadership problems, strategic problems. There's a company I got called in to work with last November. They had 26 primary initiatives.
The word primary and 26.
And initiative and 26. Yeah, it's not all aligning. But where is that coming from? That's not coming from the fact that these people aren't intelligent enough. It's actually coming from more of a place that their whole emotional state is so scattered and so fragmented because they don't feel safe and secure in their work. They're unsure about this industry. It's going through such rapid change, like many are. So a lot of the problems that are appearing across the company as a totality and the individuals within it, much more about an internal thing that's happening. And a lot of my work previously was building fundamental qualities in people so that they could improve their reading and their memory and their focus so that they could actually start to take action. But now I'm sort of interested in working with people who have no issue taking action, who have no issue getting things done, but yet there's a barrier. There's some sort of an internal block that's confusing. Either they have developed far beyond the business and the business is not catching up to them, so it feels like it's out of alignment, or the business has developed far beyond them. And they've been pouring so much into the business, but as an individual, they're still quite underdeveloped in comparison to the demands of the business. So how do we calibrate these two? And if we do, it means that things move a lot more smoothly and they progress much more in the right direction.
My experience with a lot of these types of individuals who found a significant amount of comparative success in their business or their practice to be at the level I think we're talking about is that they have to have a lot of self-confidence in specifically what they're doing, meaning that they've developed somewhat of a ego. And I don't mean they're all egoists, that they are dominated by it. But I find that a lot of them have to have gotten what they had, they have to have a certain amount of self-worth and self-value that they've crested over to accomplish things of a magnitude. And with that sometimes comes some defensiveness around change, or a defensiveness of them maybe not verbalizing this, but I'm imagined you've maybe heard at some point, Patrick, you don't know my business. You don't know what we're doing. So how do you overcome that?
I don't see a lot of self-confidence. I see a huge amount of fear. I see a lot of people where their fuel source is coming from growing up in poverty and they never want to be in that environment again, or feeling maybe once again poverty, but feeling trapped, feeling like they didn't have choice. So what they want is they want money that's going to give them the freedom to choose. There was a gentleman that I spoke with not so long ago, and I asked him if you were to kind of look outside of yourself, what do you orbit? And for this gentleman, it was money and power. He was able to say it very quickly that that's what it was. He was very accomplished, but he was extremely exhausted, but he couldn't seem to stop his relentless pursuit of whatever he seemed to be pursuing. And it was more money and more power. Now, as our conversation progressed, at the root of it, he just wanted some love and self-acceptance. This is not bad. This is fine. It's part of the development of the human being and of the psyche. We come from a place of pain and we try to transmute that pain into something that will take us forward because we don't want it to hold us back. So maybe we develop another character. We develop this man or this woman who's able to amass money or power. And now people are drawn to us because of the money and the power or the knowledge or the capacity to get things done or to help things in the community. And now people value you and see you for these qualities and these capacities. But underneath that, as soon as that is taken away, the business or taking action every day, there's a huge amount of insecurity. There's a huge amount of insecurity, and that causes a huge amount of pain and limitation on the business that ends up getting created. Because the ego and the identity of the person who founded it is so interwoven with the actions or what that business reflects about them that they're trying to keep it in a way that keeps their identity the way they want it to be. So what ends up happening is that our identity gets reduced to our biography. You know, you got a biography on me. People at the beginning of the show heard about me. I'm not that. I'm not that. If I were to describe myself as that, it would feel like it's another person. But yet we need certain terms and containers to explain it. So you're a coach. Okay, great. Now I get a sense of who you are. But you're so much more than that. You're bringing your whole lived experience into it. So it's fine to have these sort of monikers of who we are as people, because we need that to allow people to have a reference point of who we are and what we do. But my days, it's very dangerous if you think that you are that. If you allow your identity become wrapped up in that, you become very weak. And from what I see, there's very little self-confidence. There's a lot of survival, no matter how many millions you have in the bank. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, interesting.
And I would say, from my observation, I would say confidence is a sort of emergent thing. you don't craft confidence. Confidence sort of emerges, and it emerges through your view of yourself and the evidence that this view of yourself is being reinforced. So you can also be very confident that you can't do something. It's a certainty. It's a certainty of something. It's a certainty of your capabilities and your powers, which can be that it's a certainty that you can move towards something, or it's equally a certainty that you cannot, because it's been evidenced so many times before. So my interest more so is, because there's many environments that I go into with very little confidence that I can do it, but I have confidence that I can find a way. I have confidence that I'll be able to be in the uncertainty or the discomfort of it, and I'll move through it, because that's something that I have evidence of. I'm much more interested in, I suppose, expanding people's sense of value and worth beyond just their actions. So, for example, something that we're going to be launching relatively soon with HARA, which I now realize is so needed and so important, is so many of the companies that I speak to, whether it's the CEO or it's an intern, are feeling immensely overwhelmed. Now, this overwhelm is coming because of the amount of information and the amount of things that we feel that we should know, the amount of communication. There was one gentleman that I spoke with in Dallas at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and he told me he gets about 480 emails a day. Like, that's such an insane quantity. That's beyond a full-time job, just filtering through that every day. But why does this happen? Why are these tools that were meant to liberate us and free us to do the work that was most important, why are they becoming the things that are holding everybody back? Because it's a total distraction. Now, you could say it's in the design, and there's a truth to that. There's a design of a desire for engagement. That's how these products measure their value. Not how little time you spend on them, but how much time you spend on them, how much information flows through them. But I don't think it's enough to just place the blame on the product and the tool. There's something deeper that's happening here, and it's actually much more related to a sense of social security. And I've been watching this, and it's only become clear to me very much so in the last 5 or 6 months. If we just look at distributed teams, for example, where you've got, let's just say, a couple of people in Omaha, Nebraska. There's a company that I work with that have a few people there. And then you have others which are dotted around the country, but their boss and their direct report is there in Omaha. And they get to meet up with each other 2 or 3, maybe 4 times a year at conferences. Sometimes they get 15, 20 minutes. If it's 20 minutes, 25 minutes is a one-on-one chat, that feels like it's enormous. But most of the time it's in a group setting. So the conversation is more about the collective. Like, what are we all talking about? The person that I'm reporting to doesn't really know me, doesn't really know my true character. They see the analytics of what I do based on the metrics of what comes in. But as a person, who I am as a human being, they don't know me because they haven't had much time with me. I've given leadership teams this challenge to spend 45 minutes with their direct reports just on one call. And I've given them questions to ask, which are much more deep about like who they really are as human beings. And they learn so much about them and realize that their assumptions of what motivated and drove them is so different to what it was. So that's a norm that people are not really getting to see each other. Now, if I'm in New Mexico and my direct report is in Omaha, Nebraska, I see him or her 3 or 4 times a year. My promotion, how much more I'm going to earn next year or maintain my job is dependent on their view of me, how they see me. So how can I prove myself? I make sure I succeed as much as I can in the realm of the metrics. And I also make sure that I am as responsive as possible in my emails and my communication and showing that I'm on. Because by showing that I'm on and that I'm hyper responsive, it's a display in the best way possible that I'm committed and that I'm a worthy human being. And that's what's happening more and more, is that we're not engaging deeply with each other. So the context of how much we understand of each other is very low. So we invest a lot more of our energy into those low context transmissions of communication, which creates this very fragmented and distracted state, because to be not distracted and fragmented is to choose for yourself, is to choose where you're going to direct your energy, where you see that there's things happening outside, but you downgrade their importance because you upgrade the importance of what you want to do and what you see as important. But for the vast majority of people I meet, they've completely downgraded to level 0 their importance of what they want and how they want to direct their lives or their business or their day. And they completely upgrade the importance of everything that's happening around them that's coming in, because they don't want to miss a thing. Because if they do, it might threaten their job. It might threaten their sense of how they're perceived by their boss. And if that's not met, and if that's not worked on, I can offer as much content and information about how the brain works and how to organize yourself, but it won't make a difference because the human beings are in a very survivalistic state. And that's driving the show, not the rational mind, but a very, very emotional, unsure, insecure internal state.
Reminds me of a book called Tribal Leadership. I don't know if you've read this, but I think you'd like it. There's a category of stages that the Stanford professor observed in different culture and communities. The lowest level was like the kind you see in prisons, which is like defined by the affirmation, "My life sucks." That was the way they had to write it and put it. They didn't see the way out. And then the second tier, it becomes a little bit less, "My life sucks," and they can see others have it great. It's "My life sucks," but other people have it great. There's someone near them that's succeeding, probably a manager or a leader. And then level 3 is "I'm great, but you're not." And this is prolific in the corporate world, lawyers, doctors. And in order to be the greatest, they can't have competition in their office, right? It's always proving it's a survivalist. And then level 4 is "We are great." And level 5 is "Life is great." And there are very few companies that operate at that level. But just kind of connecting these dots in my head as I hear you talk, it's a little bit of that. Am I hearing this somewhat right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think we've been given these incredible tools, which are there to support us, but they're there to support what we have to actually develop us so that we can develop internally. Whereas I think in many circumstances, there's a regression taking place. We're completely divorcing ourselves or neglecting how we need to develop internally to meet the demands of what's being presented to us externally. And we're just sort of playing the victim to how life is playing out around us. And through HARA, the work that I'm doing is I'm fundamentally trying to show people you have a huge amount of agency here, but the way that you live your life is what's shaping this. If you feel like there's no space or time for that, you'll continue to suffer. And that's the truth, because you'll find that your attention is constantly going out. It's constantly about what's happening outside of you. Whereas what we give people are practices and ways to develop themselves internally, because we need that. Every time our whole range of evolution as we develop as a human species is dependent on changes to the external environment, changes to temperature, changes to food, changes to threats, changes towards opportunities. We're being given an immense amount of comfort, and so much of the products that are being designed are around the sort of more primal and primitive aspects of us. So yeah, there's definitely a lot that's happening here in recognizing that the world is changing around us. So how are we changing internally to rise from top as opposed to rising to the top? Thinking and recognizing that we have so many of these qualities in us that are incredible.
Oh yeah. And one of the things that you talk about is how to break the cycle of distraction. What does that look like in motion when you're working with someone?
Well, are there places that your attention is often getting brought to that you know is not serving you, yet it keeps happening? But then there's a reflective tendency, right, to observe and say, wow, that was not where I needed to spend my time, that was not useful to me. So there's different states of mind that arise. So what's the observation or the thing that you notice in yourself afterwards, the things that are sort of you keep going towards and you spend a lot of time? So if we take a bit more of an objective perspective, so you're looking at yourself from an outside body because you're in it at the moment and you're sort of like, you're analyzing and reasoning at the same time. So if we can be just more objective, so the analysis and the reasoning is separate, where is your attention going where it's being wasteful? If we just look at it hard and fast, because once again, I'm not of the opinion that you need to be this sense of being productive, which is bringing utility to every moment. You're building a business and you're running a business. You need clarity of mind, thinking. I chatted with a guy a couple of months ago. He was joining HARA and he was saying to me, I want to map out a 5-year plan. If I could only find 4 hours to just sit down and map out a 5-year plan, I know how crazy that sounds. And I said, is it crazy that you're mapping out a 5-year plan, or is it crazy that you think that you need 4 hours to map out a 5-year plan? He said, it's crazy that I think I need 4 hours. I should be able to do it in less. So there's this constant sense that I should be able to condense and do things very quickly, when the reality is, my days, if you're going to think about a 5-year plan, which I personally feel is maybe it's a 5-year vision, but it's hard to implement a plan. You need more than 4 hours for that, I think. It should take a lot of time and self-reflection. So from an objective view, where is your attention going that feels as though it's wasteful? And the loop of distraction is the constant pattern of the mind. It's just a constant state, in the evening watching TV, but also being on our phone and then at the dinner table watching something, or there, but your mind is being taken elsewhere. So whether we appreciate it or not, we might consider that we're training or we're working out when we go to the gym and we do specific things on our body. But when it comes to our character and our state of mind, we're constantly developing and shaping ourselves to better or worse. If you're running a business and if you're doing something for yourself, it's your clarity and your vision that shapes everything. Because I think you know as well as I do, when the value system of the business or as a way to generate interest starts going through the lens of social media and posts and engagement, suddenly it can sort of start to get warped that the opportunity comes from the degree of engagement. The opportunity comes from responding to what's happening in that space. But, you know, I have a friend who will share the dark truth, which is he runs a business around productivity. He wanted to build more leads. He spent a day, a year posting and had a team of freelancers helping him, built up his Instagram to 360,000 followers. The Instagram page is solely about this topic of productivity, running a digital marketing agency. 0.06% of his followers converted to actually purchasing his product.
Wow.
So it can become a trap in and of itself where now I've lost the direction and the vision has become skewed. I just saw that there was a lot of engagement on the post, so maybe we need to double down in more of those posts. And now we're getting more followers and now we're growing the engagement. But is that tethered to the ultimate vision of the business? For most that I mean, it's not, unless your vision is to become a content creator. But, you know, when you're a small business owner, you can get caught in that loop.
What's your personal practice to remain clear? Because as I think we both agree, sometimes it's easy to see than others. It's harder even for us to apply some of this thinking to ourselves at times because it gets cloudy.
Well, a practice which has changed a lot of things is I think I used to place too much emphasis on the market. So a lot of the businesses that I built in the past or even the talks that I gave was my observation of what the market needed. But in that process, you can feel like you lose yourself because you start just completely adjusting to the needs and the expectations of the market. And inherently, you end up that's a fast track to lose your own sense of value and worth. In the last year and a half, I've changed that where it's a dance between the two. It's what is alive in me, in what I'm seeing, in what I want to pursue, and what are the needs in the market, and how can I find a way to connect the two together. So there will be people in that space who will not be ready to receive it, and there will be moments where what I articulate is not clear enough for what the market is looking for, and that creates this constant observation loop of myself and the market. So then becomes the practice of my own observation that I have to engage with.
Having done a lot of these transformative things yourself, put them in motion for clients, what advice would you give yourself many years ago? What do you think that young version of yourself could use?
I think it would be to acknowledge uniqueness, not to be afraid of that. And then don't just try and explore that as a little thing on the side. Go right after it. Go right after your appetite. That's what I've done as an adult, and and I didn't do that much. I did it as a kid, but I also had this fear of the group and wanting to fit in with everybody else. And I think as a kid, I would have, or if I was to meet that guy, I would have told him, you see things a little bit differently, and sometimes it feels like you don't want to because you want to see it the way everybody else does, because it can feel threatening to feel that difference. But go there, just go there and let go of that judgment.
What a great note to end on. Great conversation, Patrick. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Adam. It's really been a joy to speak with you. You were a great host, great questions. All the best.
If you enjoy this podcast, please make sure to subscribe. And to stay updated on everything that the Action Catalyst is up to, make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Action Catalyst Podcast and on Twitter at Catalyst_Action. And thanks for listening.